There is a moment in every emergency room when you understand exactly who you are to the people in your life, not who you think you are, not who you have believed yourself to be across decades of showing up and providing and staying when staying was the harder choice. Who you actually are, measured by the specific and inarguable evidence of who shows up and who does not. I was in Bay 7 of the Vanderbilt University Medical Center Emergency Department on a Thursday evening in March, connected to a cardiac monitor, waiting on results from an echocardiogram that the attending physician had ordered with the focused urgency of someone who has seen a result she wants to understand better before she says anything definitive. My blood pressure was elevated in a way that concerned her. My chest had been tight since noon. I was 67 years old and I was alone in that bay, and the chair beside my bed was empty. I had called my daughter from the parking lot of the grocery store where the tightness had started. She had said she would be right there. That had been 2 hours and 40 minutes ago. My son-in-law had texted once, 40 minutes after my call. He said, "Melissa is on her way, Dad. Hang tight." That was the last communication I had received from my family. I lay in Bay 7, and I looked at the empty chair, and I thought about a question that the tightness in my chest and the monitor beeping beside me had made unusually precise. What am I going to do about this? My name is Gerald Porter. I am 69 years old now. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I spent 30 years as a commercial insurance underwriter, which is a profession built entirely on the accurate assessment of risk. And I want to tell you that nothing in 30 years of professional risk assessment prepared me for the specific clarity that a cardiac bay provides when the chair beside your bed is empty. Welcome to Dad's True Emotions. Get comfortable and stay with me tonight because this one is going to take you somewhere real. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. You are exactly where you need to be. My daughter Melissa is 43 years old. She and her husband Craig have lived in my house for the past 3 years. Not their house, my house. A 4-bedroom colonial on Brentwood Drive that I bought in 1998 and paid off in 2017, and that I have maintained with the consistent attention of someone who understands the relationship between care and longevity. The arrangement began as temporary. Craig had left a position in commercial construction management under circumstances he described as a values conflict, which I had accepted without pressing for more detail because I did not want to make my daughter's difficult moment more difficult. Melissa was working part-time at a dental office. They had 2 children, my grandchildren, who were 8 and 11, and who I was glad to have in the house, because grandchildren are the specific reward for all the work of raising children, and I intended to enjoy them. 3 years is a long time for temporary. I had noticed the temporary becoming permanent the way you notice gradual changes, too slowly and only clearly in retrospect. The guest room that had become their bedroom had been repainted without consultation. The garage had been reorganized around Craig's tools and equipment. The kitchen had been restocked with their preferences in a way that had slowly displaced mine. These were small things. I told myself they were small things because making them large things felt like choosing conflict over family. I had been choosing not to choose conflict for 3 years. The cardiac bay was clarifying what that choice had been costing me. The context of that particular Thursday was a conversation that had happened at dinner the previous Sunday. Craig had said, in the casual tone of someone raising something they have already decided, that he and Melissa had been thinking about refinancing the house. He said it the way you say something about the house when you have been living in it long enough to have forgotten whose name is on the title. I had looked at him across my own dinner table. I said, "Craig, this is my house." He said, "Of course, but if we refinanced and restructured the equity, it would give us working capital for Craig's new business venture and would be better for everyone in terms of the overall financial picture." Melissa had looked at her plate. I had said, "I will think about it." I was still thinking about it on Thursday when the tightness started in the grocery store parking lot. The physician's name was Dr. Rachel Odom. She came back to Bay 7 at the 2-hour 40-minute mark, with results that she described as concerning but not immediately critical. I had a significant arrhythmia that was going to require monitoring and likely medication adjustment and possibly a procedure. She wanted to keep me overnight for observation. She asked if there was someone she could call. I said, "My family knows I'm here." She looked at the empty chair. She said, "Would you like me to reach out to them?" I said no. I said it with a steadiness that I was manufacturing through the same professional discipline I had used in 30 years of assessments. Then I asked for a pen and the back of a pamphlet from the holder on the wall, which was the nearest available paper. I wrote for about 12 minutes while Dr. Odom arranged my overnight admission. I wrote without stopping and without editing because the clarity of that bay did not require editing. It just required honesty. Then I called my attorney. His name is Thomas Garfield, and he has handled my affairs for 16 years, and he answered his phone at 9:15 on a Thursday evening, because he is the kind of man who answers when his clients call, and who understands that the calls that come in the evening are the ones that matter. I told him where I was. I told him what the doctor had said. Then I told him what I had decided. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Gerald, are you sure?" I said, "Thomas, I am lying in a cardiac bay that my family has not arrived at in 3 hours. I am sure." He said, "I will have the documents drafted by Monday." I said, "I also need a locksmith available Saturday." Another pause. He said, "I understand. I will make the calls." I thanked him and hung up. Then I lay back on the pillow and let the monitor beside me do its work and looked at the ceiling of Bay 7 and felt, for the first time since the tightness had started in the parking lot, completely calm. Melissa arrived at 10:40, 3 hours and 20 minutes after my call from the parking lot. She came through the bay curtain with the hurried energy of someone who has been doing other things and has now arrived at the thing she was supposed to be doing, and she looked at me in the hospital bed and said, "Dad, I'm so sorry. The kids needed dinner and then there was a situation with homework and Craig had a call he couldn't miss." I looked at my daughter. I said, "Melissa, sit down." She sat in the chair that had been empty for 3 hours and 20 minutes. I said, "I am going to be all right. The doctor says it is manageable. I am staying overnight for observation. I want you to go home and take care of the children, and I will call you in the morning with an update." She said, "I can stay." I said, "I know you can. I would like you to go." She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has noticed something in her father's voice that she has not heard there before, something resolved, something that has moved past the point of asking. She hugged me. She told me she loved me. I told her I loved her too because I did, because that part was not in question and was never going to be in question. Then I watched her leave Bay 7 and I lay back and closed my eyes. I was discharged Saturday morning with a prescription adjustment and instructions for a follow-up with a cardiologist the following week. I called a cab from the hospital because I had not asked anyone to collect me, and I rode home through the Nashville morning watching the city do what it does on Saturday, unhurried, ordinary, entirely unconcerned with what had happened in Bay 7 2 nights earlier. The locksmith Thomas had arranged arrived at noon. The locks on my house on Brentwood Drive were changed in 45 minutes. 3 exterior locks, the garage side door, and the lock on the gate to the backyard. The locksmith was a quiet professional who did his work without commentary or curiosity. I tipped him well. I had already arranged the other elements before I came home. A moving company had been available Friday on short notice, the premium Friday rate, which I had paid without complaint because some things are worth the premium. They had collected and stored the specific items that were mine and mine alone, the things I was not prepared to leave in a house whose occupancy was about to change. The items that belonged to Melissa and Craig and the children remained in place. Thomas's documents were ready. He had driven them to the hospital Friday morning, and I had signed them from the bed, which he had arranged with a mobile notary because Thomas is thorough, and because he has known me long enough to understand that when I say Monday, he should have them ready sooner. The documents were a formal notice of termination of the informal occupancy arrangement, specifying 30 days for Melissa, Craig, and the children to secure alternative housing, offering a specific financial assistance amount from me to facilitate that transition because the children were my grandchildren, and I was not going to allow their parents' choices to make their lives harder without offering what I could, and confirming that the property at Brentwood Drive would not be refinanced, restructured, or encumbered in any way that required my signature, which it would, because my name was on the title, and that was not a detail that was going to change. On the kitchen counter of the house, I placed one photograph, a framed photograph that I had taken off the wall of the hallway, the one Melissa had walked past 10,000 times in 3 years of living under my roof. It was taken at her mother's funeral 12 years ago. Patricia in the front row of the church with her hands in her lap and her eyes closed, and an expression of peace that the photographer had captured without knowing how rare that expression was or how long I had been looking for it in the years since. Behind the photograph, I placed a folded note, 1 page. I had written it in the hospital on the back of the pamphlet, and I had copied it at home onto proper paper because some things deserve proper paper. The note said, "On Thursday evening, I was in Bay 7 of the Vanderbilt Emergency Department from 7 p.m. until after 10:30 p.m. The chair beside my bed was empty. I have spent 3 years choosing not to choose conflict over family. The chair being empty for 3 hours and 20 minutes clarified for me that the choice I had been making was not preserving the family. It was simply delaying an honest accounting. The financial assistance amount in Thomas Garfield's letter is genuine. Use it for the children first. Everything else is negotiable. The house is not negotiable. I love you both, and I love those children without qualification. That is not what changed. What changed is my willingness to accept less than I deserve from people I love in the name of keeping a peace that was never actually peaceful. Your father, Gerald." I placed the documents beside the note. Then I picked up my overnight bag, and I left the house on Brentwood Drive and drove to the extended stay hotel on West End, where Thomas had made a reservation for me because he is thorough, and because I had told him in the Friday morning hospital conversation that I would need somewhere to be while the 30 days ran. The room was clean and quiet, and it had a window that looked out at a courtyard with a large oak tree in it. I sat in the chair by the window and looked at the oak tree and thought about Patricia and Bay 7 in 3 hours and 20 minutes and the specific weight of a chair that is supposed to be occupied and is not. Then I thought about the note on the kitchen counter and the photograph beside it, and I felt the same calm I had felt in the hospital when I made the decision, the calm of a man who has finally aligned his actions with what he knows to be true. Melissa called at 2:15 in the afternoon. I had been expecting the call, and I answered on the second ring. She said, "Dad, I went home and found the locks changed." I said, "Yes." She said, "Dad," she stopped. She started again. "Dad, I'm sorry about Thursday. I know that I should have been there sooner, and I'm sorry." I said, "Melissa, I believe you are sorry. I also need you to understand that the locks and the documents are not a punishment for Thursday. Thursday was a clarification. The locks and the documents are a response to 3 years, not to 1 evening." She was quiet. I said, "The financial assistance in Thomas's letter is real. I want you to use it. I want the children settled somewhere good, and I want you to have what you need to make that happen. But Brentwood Drive belongs to me, and it is not going to be refinanced or restructured, and the arrangement that has been in place for 3 years is over." She said, "Where are you?" I said I am somewhere comfortable. I am going to stay there while you use the 30 days. Then I am going home. She said, can we talk in person? I said yes. Next week, after I have seen the cardiologist and know more about what I am managing medically. Then I want to sit down with you and have an honest conversation about what these 3 years have actually looked like from my side, which is a conversation we have not had because I kept choosing not to have it. She said, okay, Dad, okay. Then she said, the photograph. She stopped. I waited. She said, I stopped in front of it for a long time. I forgot how she looked in that photograph. I said, I know. I took it off the wall because it needed to come with me. But you have the memory of it, which is yours and always was. She said, I love you, Dad. I said, I love you too. That is not in dispute. See you next week. Craig called at 4:30. He had a different energy than Melissa, the energy of a man who has been caught in a position he had not expected to be catchable in and who is running calculations. He said, Gerald, I think we need to talk about the 30 days. He said it the way he had said the refinancing, with the casual assumption that the terms were negotiable. I said, Craig, the terms are in the document. Thomas is available if you have legal questions about the document. The 30 days is the 30 days. He said, that's not a lot of time. I said, it is more time than you gave me consideration for on Thursday evening. He was quiet. I said, Craig, you are a competent man. You have built things before and you will build things again. The children need a home and you and Melissa are capable of providing one. The financial assistance in Thomas's letter gives you a real start. Use it well. He said, I didn't think you would actually do this. I said, I know. That is the information I needed you to have. He said, okay. Then after a pause, he said, I respect it. He said it with a grudging honesty that was more genuine than most things he had said to me in 3 years. I said, I appreciate that. Good luck, Craig. I hung up. I looked out at the oak tree in the courtyard. Its leaves were doing what leaves do in early spring, the tentative emergence of new growth on branches that had held through the winter, unhurried, operating on a schedule that nobody had established for them. The cardiologist was on Tuesday. Dr. Odom had referred me to a specialist named Dr. Patricia Wells, who had the focused efficiency of someone who sees what she sees and says what she means, and who told me after a thorough examination that my condition was manageable with medication and lifestyle adjustment and follow-up monitoring. She said, Mr. Porter, you are not in crisis. You are in the early stages of something that people manage well when they manage it seriously. I told her I intended to manage it seriously. She said, good, I will see you in 6 weeks. I drove back to the extended stay hotel and sat by the window with the oak tree, and I thought about seriously, about what it meant to manage something seriously, about the 3 years on Brentwood Drive that I had not managed seriously because seriousness felt like conflict, and I had been choosing not to choose conflict. I was choosing now. Finally, clearly, from a bay with an empty chair and a cardiac monitor, and the specific precision of understanding that the time available to you is not unlimited, and that spending it on arrangements that do not serve you is a choice with a cost that compounds. Melissa and I had lunch on a Thursday, exactly 1 week after the ER. She came alone, without Craig, which told me she had made a decision to show up as herself rather than as part of a negotiating unit. We sat across from each other at a restaurant she had chosen, somewhere neutral, somewhere neither of us had associations with, and we talked for 2 hours. She told me things she had not told me in 3 years. About Craig's situation, more of which she understood now than she had when the arrangement began, about the financial pressure she had been managing, about the way the temporary had become permanent not through anyone's explicit decision, but through the accumulated inertia of not making a different one. She said I should have been there Thursday, not just because you were sick, Because you are my father and I have been in your house for 3 years and I have not been taking care of you the way you took care of me. I said, Melissa, I did not take care of you so that you would take care of me. I took care of you because you were my child and it was what I was supposed to do. What I needed in that bay was not caretaking. It was presence. The knowledge that if something happened, someone who loved me would be in the room. She looked at the table, then she looked at me. She said I should have been in the room. I said, yes, you should have. We sat with that for a moment, the kind of moment where the truth has just been said plainly by both people, and there is nothing left to do except let it settle. Then she said, are you going to be all right? I said, the doctor says yes. I said, are you going to find a good place for those children? She said, we already have a lead, a rental in Bellevue with a good school district. Craig is moving on it this week. I said, good. Use the financial assistance for the deposit and the first month. Keep the rest as a cushion. She said, Dad, why are you still helping us? I said, because you are my daughter and those are my grandchildren, and helping people I love is not contingent on the people I love behaving perfectly. It is contingent on those people being willing to be honest with me. You are being honest with me right now. She reached across the table and took my hand. I let her hold it. Outside, Nashville was being itself, warm and a little chaotic, and full of people living their ordinary Thursday lives without the specific understanding that comes from a cardiac bay on a Thursday evening. I sat across from my daughter with her hand over mine, and I thought about the photograph on the kitchen counter, and the note beside it and the oak tree in the courtyard, and the fact that I was going home to Brentwood Drive in 3 weeks. Home, mine. The locks I had changed and the air I had been breathing for 27 years, and the name on the title that was not going to change. I was going home. I was going to manage this seriously. And for the first time in 3 years, I was going to do it on my own terms. Here is what I want to leave you with. The emergency room teaches you things that ordinary life lets you postpone. It teaches you about presence, about who shows up and who does not, about the specific value of the people who walk through the curtain, and the specific cost of the chair that stays empty. I spent 3 years choosing not to choose conflict. The monitor in Bay 7 told me what that choice had been costing me, not in money, in the daily experience of being in my own home without feeling that my home was mine. You are allowed to expect presence from the people who live under your roof. You are allowed to hold the line on what belongs to you. You are allowed to change the locks on the life you built when the people who have been given access to it have stopped treating that access as the privilege it is. The chair beside your bed should not be empty, and if it is, you are allowed to do something about it. I did. If this story reached you tonight, hit that like button and subscribe to Dad's True Emotions. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.